The sword hit the floor 3 feet from my boots, and every alien in the atrium stopped breathing. I did not understand it at the time. I was Commander Ethan Calloway, a diplomatic attaché assigned to the neutral trade station Kethera Annex, and I had been on this posting for exactly 91 days. In those 91 days, I had learned 2 things with absolute certainty. First, that nobody in the galactic community cared about humans. We were new, we were small. We occupied a single unremarkable system on the outer edge of mapped space, and our greatest contribution to galactic culture, as far as anyone could tell, was a talent for surviving on planets that should have killed us. Second, and far more important for what was about to happen, I had learned that you never, under any circumstances, touched a Vorshala weapon. The blade spun twice on the polished floor and came to rest with its tip pointing directly at me, as if it had chosen where to land. I looked down at it. The metal was a deep, dark blue, veined with lighter threads that pulsed like capillaries, carrying light instead of blood. Even lying still on the floor, separated from its wielder, the weapon seemed alive. It breathed. It hummed. It radiated a presence that made the air around it feel thick and charged, the way the atmosphere feels just before a thunderstorm breaks. Then I looked up at the woman who had dropped it. High Blade Commander Cirith Val Corin stood 4 feet taller than me. Her scaled skin was the color of deep ocean water, and it shifted hue as she moved, darkening to near black along her arms and shoulders, before lightening to a pale teal at her throat and jaw. She had 6 eyes, arranged in 2 rows of 3, and every one of them was fixed on the sword at my feet. She had marched into the atrium, at the head of 12 elite warriors, each of them carrying a weapon at the hip that glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. The entire corridor had cleared the moment they appeared. Every species on the station knew what the Vorshala were. Apex predators, born warriors. A civilization so old and so feared that even the Drenari, who manufactured weapons the way other species manufactured furniture, gave them a wide berth. And now their commander's ceremonial scabbard clasp had failed, and her sacred blade was lying on the floor of a trade station atrium, and nobody was moving. I looked around. 50 aliens stood frozen in a ring around us. Gantherin merchants with their translucent wings pressed flat against their backs. Tellerin traders clutching their merchandise. Drenari weapons dealers whose hands had instinctively moved toward their own sidearms before freezing in place. A handful of species I could not even name, all of them paralyzed by the same invisible force. Not one of them moved toward the sword. Not one of them even looked at it directly. They were all staring at Sisareth, waiting for her to pick it up, because apparently, touching a Vorshala blade was somewhere between a diplomatic incident and a death sentence. The silence stretched. Cyrith's warriors had their hands on their own weapons, their postures rigid with something I mistook for anger, but would later understand was dread. The blade on the floor pulsed blue, slow and rhythmic, like a sleeping heart waiting to be woken. And I did the single dumbest thing I had ever done in my career. I bent down and picked it up. It was reflex. Pure, stupid, human reflex. The kind of thing your body does before your brain has time to object. Someone drops something at your feet. You pick it up and hand it back. My mother raised me with basic manners, and apparently those manners did not include a clause for alien warrior death swords. I wrapped my fingers around the flat of the blade, lifted it off the floor, flipped it in my hand with a practiced motion that came from decades of passing kitchen knives and screwdrivers, and extended it toward Cyrith handle first. The pain hit me like a lightning strike. White fire erupted from the metal and shot straight through my palm, up my wrist, and into the bones of my forearm. I heard myself make a sound that was not quite a scream and not quite a gasp, something primal and involuntary that tore out of my throat before I could clamp my jaw shut. My skin blistered instantly. I could smell it. That terrible sweet smell of burning flesh that registers in some ancient part of your brain as wrong, wrong, wrong. Every nerve in my hand detonated at once, and my vision went white at the edges, and my knees buckled, and the pain was so total and so immediate that for one eternal second I could not think at all. I did not let go. I do not know why. Part of it was shock. The pain was so sudden and so overwhelming that my fingers locked instead of opening, the way a hand will sometimes clench around an electric cable instead of releasing it. Muscle spasm. Involuntary contraction. The body's wiring misfiring in the face of a stimulus it was never designed to handle. Part of it was stubbornness, the deep and irrational human refusal to drop something you are holding, simply because it hurts. I had been raised by a man who finished every project he started, who ran on broken toes, who held burning pot handles long enough to set them on the counter, because dropping them might dent the floor. That stubbornness was in my blood. But there was something else too, something underneath the pain, behind it, woven into it like a melody hidden inside thunder. A feeling I had no name for, a resonance, a hum that bypassed my ears and went straight into my nervous system, vibrating through my bones and my blood and the spaces between my cells, as if the blade was not just burning me but speaking to me, asking me a question in a language that had no words, a language that my conscious mind could not decode, but that some deeper part of me understood perfectly. My hand shook, my arm shook, my entire body trembled with the effort of remaining upright. I held the sword out toward Sireth with smoke rising from my palm and tears running down my face, and I said through clenched teeth, "I believe you dropped this." Sireth did not take it. She was staring at me. All 6 of her eyes were wide, the vertical pupils dilated to full circles, and I had spent enough time around the Vorshala to know that expression. It was not anger, it was not offense, it was fear. This 7-foot warrior who commanded an elite guard and carried a weapon bonded to her nervous system since childhood was looking at me the way a person looks at something that should not exist. Then I saw the light. The blade's glow had changed. The steady blue pulse, the one that matched the rhythm of Sireth's heartbeat, was gone. In its place was something I had never seen on any Vorshala weapon, something that made every alien in the atrium take an involuntary step backward. The metal was radiating gold. Deep, warm, pulsing gold, bright enough to cast long shadows across the atrium floor, bright enough to illuminate the faces of every watcher in the crowd. It pulsed in a rhythm I did not recognize at first, a beat that did not match Sireth's heartbeat or any of her warriors' heartbeats. Then I felt it. The gold pulse matched my heartbeat, not hers, mine. Behind Sireth, her warriors came apart. The first one to break was the tallest, a massive Vorshala, with ritual scars across his face and forearms, the kind of scars a warrior earns through decades of combat. He staggered backward, as if someone had shoved him in the chest, his own blade rattling against his armor. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Then the warrior beside him dropped his weapon entirely. It hit the floor with a ringing crash that echoed through the silent atrium, and the warrior fell to his knees and pressed his forehead to the ground. A third warrior turned and walked away, not slowly, fast, his hands open and empty at his sides, his armor clanking with each hurried step. Then 2 more dropped their blades, then 3 more. One of the kneeling warriors whispered a single word. My translator picked it up and rendered it in English, with a note that said there was no direct equivalent. Kael'thar. The word meant nothing to me. I stood there, hand burning, sword blazing gold, and watched 12 of the most feared soldiers in the known galaxy come undone in front of me. One of them was weeping, actual tears rolling down scaled cheeks. Another was repeating a phrase that my translator rendered as, "It cannot be, it cannot be, it cannot be." Their discipline, their training, their lifetimes of combat readiness, all of it dissolved in the golden light pouring from the blade in my burning hand. Sireth moved. She lunged forward and ripped the sword from my grip with a motion so fast I barely registered it. The gold light died the instant the blade left my skin. She shoved it into her scabbard without looking at it, without checking the broken clasp, without any of the careful, reverential ceremony I had seen Vorshala warriors perform when handling their weapons. She jammed it home and sealed the scabbard with both hands, and then she looked at me one last time with those 6 wide eyes. Then she turned and walked away. Her warriors scrambled to follow. Some of them scooped up their dropped weapons with shaking hands. Others left theirs lying on the floor. They moved with none of the disciplined precision they had shown when they entered. They moved like people evacuating a collapsing building. Within 30 seconds, the atrium was empty, except for me and the ring of frozen aliens who had witnessed the entire thing. I stood there alone, holding my scorched hand against my chest. My palm was a ruin of blisters and raw tissue, the skin swollen and weeping, already turning the angry red of a second-degree burn. The pain was enormous, a deep throbbing ache that pulsed with every heartbeat, and I could feel tears still drying on my cheeks. I could smell the faint, lingering scent of smoke. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. A Gantharan merchant near the exit made a sound that I later learned was a prayer to a deity whose name I could not pronounce. Then he turned and hurried away without looking back. The others followed, one by one, until the atrium was completely empty. Just me, and the blood pounding in my ears, and the lingering echo of that single whispered word. Kael'thar. My station comm buzzed. Calloway. The voice of Ambassador Diane Hargrove was sharp enough to cut glass. What the hell did you just do? I returned her sword, I said. The Vorshala delegation just sealed their ship. They are refusing all communication. Every channel is dead. The High Blade Commander's personal guard just abandoned their weapons in a public atrium. I have 17 incident reports hitting my desk simultaneously, and a station administrator who is trying to reach me from what I can only describe as a state of uncontrolled hysteria. So I am going to ask you one more time, Commander. What did you do? I looked down at my burned hand. The blisters were angry and red, already swelling. The skin pulled tight with the kind of heat damage that would scar. But underneath the burns, just barely visible beneath the ruined skin, I could see something that made no sense at all. Faint lines running through the tissue. Thin, metallic, gold, like threads of light woven into the structure of my palm. I honestly do not know, I said. That was the truth. I did not know what I had done. I did not know why 12 warriors had run, or what the gold light signified, or why a word I had never heard before had reduced battle-hardened soldiers to trembling prayer. But I was about to find out, and what I learned would change everything. The medical bay on Cathara Annex was a sterile white room that smelled like disinfectant and alien antiseptic compounds that stung the back of my throat. Dr. Liam Ashworth, the station's only human physician, was the kind of man who approached catastrophe the way other people approached crossword puzzles, with focused curiosity and a mug of tea within reach. He sat across from me and examined my burned hand under a magnification screen, and the expression on his face cycled through surprise, confusion, and a kind of delighted bewilderment that told me what he was seeing did not match anything in his medical training. "The burn pattern is wrong," he said. "It feels pretty right," I said, "in the sense that it hurts enormously. I mean, the cellular damage does not match a thermal burn. There is no charring, no carbonization of tissue. The damage profile looks more like a targeted radiation exposure, but with a precision that is frankly absurd. It only affected the specific skin cells that were in direct contact with the metal. The cells a fraction of a millimeter away are completely unharmed." He adjusted the magnification and leaned closer. "And then there are these." He meant the gold lines. Under the scanner they were clearly visible. A web of metallic threads running just beneath the surface of my skin, branching outward from the center of my palm, like the root system of a plant growing through soil. They were thin, almost too thin to see with the naked eye, but the scanner picked them up as bright golden filaments against the red of inflamed tissue. "What are they?" I asked. "If I had to guess, and I want to stress that this is entirely a guess because nothing in the medical literature covers this scenario, I would say they are trace particles of whatever psycho-reactive alloy the Vorshala use in their weapons. The metal appears to have left behind a residue when it burned you, and that residue is doing something I have never seen foreign material do in human tissue. It is integrating." "Integrating?" "Bonding. At a cellular level, your skin cells are not treating the metallic particles as invaders. They are not mounting an immune response. They are incorporating the material into their own structure, the way a bone incorporates a surgical implant over time, except this is happening in hours instead of months." I stared at my hand. The gold threads pulsed faintly, barely visible, in rhythm with my heartbeat. A quiet, patient glow that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than my skin. "Is that dangerous?" I asked. I have absolutely no idea, said Dr. Ashworth. He took a sip of his tea. But it is fascinating. Before I could respond, the medbay door opened, and Station Administrator Pellix walked in. Pellix was a gantharan, a species that resembled tall, thin insects with translucent wings they kept folded against their backs. In 3 months on this station, Pellix had never once acknowledged my existence. He had looked through me at diplomatic functions, walked past me in corridors without a glance, and once physically stepped over my extended foot to avoid any possibility of interaction. Humans were beneath his notice. We were unranked, unimportant, and deeply uninteresting. He was noticing me now. "Commander Calloway," he said, and his voice carried a tremor that his translator could not quite smooth away. "We need to talk about what you have done." He pulled a chair close to my treatment table and sat down. His wings were shaking. Gantharans only shook their wings during significant distress, the equivalent of a human's hands trembling. Whatever had happened in that atrium, its effects had reached far beyond the Vorshala delegation. "The word the warrior said," Pellix began. "Kael'thar, do you know what it means?" My translator could not find an equivalent. Because there is no equivalent in your language, or in any language, really. The closest translation would be blade thief, but that fails to capture the weight of the concept. The Kael'thar is not simply a word, Commander. It is a prophecy, a warning. The oldest and most deeply feared concept in Vorshala culture, embedded in their society the way the concept of mortality is embedded in yours. He paused, and I watched his wings tremble against his back. "Their weapons," he continued. "The Taelith blades. You understand the basics of the bonding process? The metal is psychoreactive. It links to the wielder's nervous system. Touching someone else's blade is forbidden. It is forbidden because the blade will reject any nervous system other than its bonded wielder's. Violently. Instantly. Every species that has ever made contact with a Taelith blade has experienced what you experienced. The burning, the overwhelming pain. But here is the crucial difference, Commander. Every species that has ever touched a Taelith blade has dropped it immediately. The pain is not accidental. It is engineered. The metal is specifically designed to force rejection, to create a response so extreme that the unauthorized hand has no choice but to release. It is a defense mechanism built into the bonding process itself, ensuring that no one but the true wielder can hold the weapon for more than a fraction of a second. "I did not drop it," I said. "No," said Pellix, and his voice dropped low. "You did not. And that is what has terrified every Vorshala on this station. Because their oldest texts, the founding documents of their warrior culture, contain a prophecy, the Kael'thar doctrine. It says that one day, a being will come who can hold a burning blade and refuse to let go. And when that happens, the blade will begin to question its allegiance. The gold light you saw was not a malfunction. It was not a warning signal. It was the blade recognizing you, testing you, reaching out to bond with your nervous system because it detected something in you that overpowered its existing connection to Cyreth." The room went very quiet. Dr. Ashworth had stopped examining my hand and was staring at Pellix with his tea frozen halfway to his lips. "You are telling me," I said slowly, "that I almost stole her sword. Not physically, at a fundamental level. I am telling you that you almost broke the most sacred bond in Vorshala civilization, their entire warrior culture, their military structure, their social hierarchy, their concept of identity and worth. All of it is built on the principle that the blade bond is absolute and unbreakable. What you did in that atrium was not an offense or a provocation. It was an impossibility made real. You held a burning blade. You did not release it, and the blade responded by reaching for you over its bonded master." I sat there listening to my own heartbeat, feeling the faint gold pulse in my palm that beat in perfect synchronization with it. "How bad is this?" I asked. Pellix's wings folded tight against his back. The last time a Kael'thar event occurred was 4,000 years ago. The outsider who triggered it, a member of a species called the Rithani, used the stolen blade to raise an army and conquer a third of the Vorshala Empire. The war lasted 2 centuries and cost billions of lives. It nearly ended their civilization entirely. They have spent 4 millennia telling themselves it could never happen again, building their culture around the idea that it was a singular aberration, And then a human diplomatic attaché picked up a sword in a trade station lobby because he thought it would be impolite to leave it on the floor. He stood and straightened his robes with hands that were not entirely steady. "Commander Calloway," he said, "I strongly suggest you find a way to resolve this before the Vorshala High Command decides that the simplest solution is to eliminate you, and possibly everyone who shares your species, before the prophecy can fulfill itself." He left, the door sealed behind him. Dr. Ashworth and I sat in the humming silence of the medical bay. "Well," said the doctor, finally lifting his tea, "that is not ideal." I looked at my gold-threaded palm and slowly flexed my fingers. The threads pulsed, steady, patient, waiting for something I did not yet understand. No, it was not ideal at all. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life, and I had served a 2-year rotation on a deep space relay station, where the only entertainment was a library of agricultural manuals and a chess program that crashed every time you tried to castle. But boredom and dread are different creatures entirely, and what settled over Cathara Annex in the wake of the atrium incident was pure, suffocating dread. I tried to apologize. That was my first instinct, and the only tool in my kit that seemed remotely applicable. I was a diplomat. Diplomats apologize, clarify, and de-escalate. I drafted a written statement of regret, had it translated into 3 Vorshala dialects, put on my cleanest uniform, and walked to the Vorshala docking section 14 hours after the incident. I got within 30 meters of their blast door before the guards stopped me. They did not threaten me. That was the part that unsettled me most. Vorshala guards were famous for their aggression, for the way they challenged anyone who approached their territory with drawn weapons and snarled challenges that left no room for misunderstanding. These guards pressed themselves against the corridor walls as I approached. They held their weapons pointed at the floor, not at me. One of them would not look at me at all, keeping his eyes fixed on a point somewhere above my left shoulder, as if making direct eye contact was something he could not bring himself to do. "I need to speak with Highblade Commander Sirith," I said. "No," said the senior guard. His voice was flat and deliberately controlled, the voice of someone managing enormous emotion through sheer force of discipline. "The Highblade Commander is not receiving visitors. I want to apologize. What happened in the atrium was an accident, a misunderstanding. I did not know what I was doing." The guard's jaw tightened. "We know you did not know. That makes it worse. Far worse." He sealed the blast door. Through the thick metal I could hear voices on the other side. Sireth's voice, low and intense, arguing with what sounded like several of her officers at once. My translator, pressed against the door, picked up broken fragments distorted by the barrier between us. "Not possible. A soft species. No martial tradition. No blade heritage. How can the metal reach for something that has no training, no conditioning, no preparation?" Another voice, higher and more urgent. "The blade spoke, Commander. You felt it. We all felt it. The gold pulse was unmistakable. The metal made its intention clear." Then Sirith again, quieter now, almost a whisper, as if she were saying something she could not bear to say aloud. "The blade wanted him. I felt it pull away from me. My own weapon, pulling away." I stepped back from the door and stood in the empty corridor for a long time. The gold lines in my palm itched. Not painfully, persistently. Like a healing wound generating new tissue beneath the surface. Back in my quarters, I pulled every file humanity had on the Vorshala. Most of the available data was surface level, the kind of overview that junior diplomats received during their first week of cultural orientation. Warrior culture, strict honor codes. A military hierarchy based on the quality of one's blade bond, but buried in the academic archives, in papers written by xenoanthropologists who had spent decades studying Vorshala society from a careful distance, I found the deeper history, the real history, the kind that explained why 12 warriors had fled a room at the sight of golden light. The Talith blades were not merely weapons. They were forged from a metal found only on the Vorshala homeworld, a psychoreactive alloy that existed in a state halfway between solid matter and living tissue. Scientists from other species had tried to study it. The metal resisted analysis. It changed its properties when observed, It responded to proximity. It seemed to possess something that was not intelligence exactly, but was not entirely unlike it either. When a Vorshala child reached maturity, they underwent the bonding ceremony. A freshly forged blade was pressed against the child's bare skin. The metal would taste their nervous system. It would map their neural pathways, catalog their emotional architecture, measure the shape and intensity of their will. If the metal found what it was looking for, some quality of determination or purpose or fire that met its unknowable criteria, the bond formed. The blade became an extension of the warrior. It would pulse with their heartbeat, respond to their emotions, move in their hand as if guided by shared thought. Those who the metal rejected became civilians, forever marked as unworthy of the blade. There was no appeal. The metal chose. And then there was the Kael'thar. The oldest Vorshala texts described it with a reverence that bordered on horror. The great fear, the ancient dread, the idea that a blade, once bonded, might find a stronger match. That the sacred link between warrior and weapon was not permanent, but conditional. A relationship maintained only as long as the blade found nothing better. Somewhere in the universe, the texts warned, there existed beings whose neural signatures burned so bright that they could overpower an existing bond and steal the blade's allegiance. It was their deepest cultural nightmare, the monster under the bed, the shadow in the temple, the reason they guarded their weapons with such ferocity and reacted with such violence to anyone who reached toward them. Because every Vorshala warrior, no matter how powerful, no matter how pure their bond, carried the secret fear that their blade might one day turn its attention elsewhere. 3 times in recorded history, a Kael'thar event had occurred. 3 times, an outsider had held a burning blade and refused to release it. Each time, the blade had begun to shift its loyalty. Each time, catastrophic war had followed. The Rathani conquest 4,000 years ago had been the worst. An entire empire almost consumed. Billions dead. Centuries of recovery. The Vorshala had rebuilt their civilization on the ashes of that war and sworn it would never happen again. And then I had to go and be polite. The morning after my failed attempt to reach Cyreth, I woke up and checked my hand. The gold lines had spread overnight. They extended past my wrist now, thin metallic threads running up the inside of my forearm in a pattern that looked disturbingly like circuitry. I went straight to the medical bay. Dr. Ashworth examined the new growth and confirmed what I already suspected. The particles are propagating, he said, adjusting his scanner with the kind of focused calm that either indicated extraordinary professionalism or a profound disconnection from the severity of the situation. They are extending through your peripheral nervous system. Specifically, they are mapping your sensory and motor pathways, the same neural architecture that Taelith metal uses to bond with Vorshala warriors. Is my body fighting it? That is the remarkable thing, Commander. No. Your immune system is not treating the particles as foreign material. Your T cells are ignoring them. Your neural tissue is accepting them as native components. I ran a comparison against the limited data we have on Vorshala bonding biology. He paused and cleaned his glasses, which I had learned was his tell for information he considered significant. Your integration rate is approximately 3 times faster than anything documented in a Vorshala subject. I stared at him. Your neural architecture, he continued, appears to be extraordinarily compatible with Taelith metal. More compatible, in fact, than the species that evolved alongside it. The psychoreactive alloy is designed to interface with a biological nervous system. It is looking for specific qualities: neural plasticity, synaptic density, electrochemical bandwidth, and human brains, Commander, have all 3 in quantities that significantly exceed the Vorshala baseline. What happens if I touch the blade again? Dr. Ashworth set down his glasses. Based on the integration rate I am seeing, if you maintained contact with the blade for more than a few seconds, the bond would almost certainly complete. The weapon would become neurologically indistinguishable from a part of your body, permanently. I flexed my hand. The gold threads pulsed. Do not touch that sword again, he said. I had no intention of touching the sword again, but the sword, it seemed, had intentions of its own. Later that day, a message arrived on my personal comm, not through official diplomatic channels, not routed through the ambassador's office, or filtered through station communications. It was tagged with Sireth's personal command seal, encrypted in a Vorshala military cipher that my system took 15 seconds to decode, and when my translator finished rendering the contents into English, it flagged the result with a note I had never seen before. Cultural significance exceeds translation capacity. It was a Val Korath. I took it to Pelix. The station administrator read the message 3 times. By the second reading, the color had drained from his translucent skin, to the point where I could see the vascular network beneath it, organs pumping fluid through membranes that had gone nearly clear with shock. "This is worse than I feared," he said. "What is a Val Korath?" "A ritual acknowledgement, ancient, formal, binding under Vorshala military law. The closest translation would be, 'I see the fire in you, and I do not look away.' It is issued by a blade master to someone they formally recognize as a legitimate threat to their bond." "She is challenging me?" "She is doing something far more significant and far more dangerous than a simple challenge. A Val Korath triggers a formal protocol that has not been invoked in 4,000 years. You now have 2 options, Commander. Only 2. And refusing both carries consequences that will extend far beyond your personal situation." He pulled up a holographic display between us and projected 2 documents written in the angular script of formal Vorshala. Option 1 is the Trial of Denial, a ritual designed to prove that the blade was mistaken. You hold the blade again, in a controlled setting, while Sireth's warriors administer a systematic beating. If you release the blade at any point during the beating, the Kael'thar event is officially nullified. The blade's moment of wavering is expunged from the record. Everyone moves on. And option 2? You accept the Val Korath at face value, and meet Sireth in a formal blade duel to determine who the weapon truly belongs to. I stared at him. I have never held a sword in my life. Before 3 days ago, the closest I had come to a bladed weapon was a butter knife. Then I strongly recommend option 1. And if I refuse both options entirely? Pelix's wings pressed flat against his back with an audible click. Then the Vorshala interpreted as cowardice. Not personal cowardice, Commander. Species-level cowardice. They will classify humanity as unworthy of galactic recognition and withdraw from every treaty, trade agreement, and diplomatic accord that includes your people. You will be erased from the galactic stage before you were ever truly present on it. I sat in that office and stared at the holographic documents and felt the gold threads in my arm pulse with a rhythm that matched nothing in the room except my own heart. "The Trial of Denial," I said. "Tell me everything." Pelix walked me through it in detail that did nothing for my state of mind. I would stand in a ritual circle before witnesses. Sireth would place her blade on a ceremonial pedestal. I would pick it up. If I released it voluntarily within the first 10 heartbeats, the trial ended peacefully, and the crisis dissipated. If I held past 10 heartbeats, the warriors would begin striking me with ceremonial rods, blunted weapons, designed to inflict maximum pain without lethal damage. The beating would continue until the blade fell from my hand. "And what if I do not drop it?" I asked. Pelix looked at me for a very long time. "Then the blade bonds with you permanently. You become Talith Val, Blade Sovereign, the highest title in Vorshala military hierarchy. You would technically outrank every blade-bearing warrior in their entire empire." That sounds like it could start a war. It would not start a war, Commander. It would start the war. The one their prophecies have warned about for 4,000 years. The one their entire civilization has been built to prevent. I went back to my quarters and sat on my bunk and looked at my hand. The gold lines had spread past my forearm now, thin metallic threads crawling upward with the slow inevitability of something that knew exactly where it was going. I could feel them, not just see them. They had developed a presence, a weight, a subtle vibration that sat just below the threshold of conscious awareness. When I closed my eyes and focused, I could sense something at the far end of those golden threads, a distant pulse, steady and slow and infinitely patient. The blade, Sireth's blade, reaching for me across the station through the particles it had planted in my nervous system. Calling. I told the ambassador I would do the trial of denial. "Good," said Diane Hargrove. Her voice carried the clipped efficiency of someone who needed this problem solved yesterday. "Pick up the sword, Hold it for a few seconds. Drop it. Simple. What if I cannot drop it? What do you mean? When I held it in the atrium, my hand locked. My fingers would not open. It was not a conscious decision. My body, physically, would not release the blade. I tried to let go, and my hand did not respond. There was a pause on the other end that felt longer than it should have. Calloway, are you telling me there is a chance you will fail this trial? I am telling you, I do not fully understand what my body will do when I touch that blade again. Dr. Ashworth says, the metal particles in my system are bonding with my nervous system faster than they bond with the Vorshela themselves. If the blade takes control of my motor functions the way it did in the atrium, I may not have the ability to release it, regardless of what I want. Then you need to find that ability, Commander. Fast. Because if you hold on to that sword through a ritual beating broadcast to 36 species, we are not looking at a diplomatic incident. We are looking at a civilization-level crisis that will define humanity's place in the galaxy for centuries. I told her I understood. I told her I would drop the sword. I told myself the same thing, lying on my bunk in the dark, with the gold pulse beating steadily in my arm, and the faint, distant song of the blade humming at the edge of my awareness. I did not sleep that night, and when I finally closed my eyes just before dawn, I dreamed I was standing in an empty field, holding a sword that blazed like a second sun, and in the dream, my hand was fused to the hilt, and the blade was singing, and the song was my name. I managed a meeting with Sirith before the trial. It was unofficial, brokered through a Gantheran translator named Voss, who served as a neutral intermediary for situations too sensitive for standard diplomatic channels. We met in a small conference room on a neutral deck, separated by a table wide enough that neither of us could reach the other. 2 chairs, no weapons, no recording devices, no guards. Sirith came alone. She looked different without the full ceremonial armor and the phalanx of warriors at her back. Smaller, though she still towered above me by more than a meter. The deep blue of her scales had faded slightly, as if the color itself had been drained by stress. Her 6 eyes moved constantly, scanning the room, scanning me, scanning the walls and the door, and the ventilation grates, never settling anywhere for more than a moment. She carried herself with the careful rigidity of someone holding something together, through willpower alone. "You are afraid of me," I said. It was not a question. "I am afraid of what you represent," she replied. Her voice was deeper than I expected in this quiet setting, resonant with harmonics that my translator struggled to flatten into English. In 4,000 years, no outsider has triggered a Kael'thar event. We had convinced ourselves it was myth, a parable for children, a story told to young warriors to remind them of the value of discipline and dedication. One day someone stronger will come for your blade. It was supposed to be a metaphor, and then you walked into an atrium and held a burning blade with your bare hand because you thought it would be courteous. It seemed like the right thing to do. That is precisely what disturbs me most. She leaned forward, and all 6 of her eyes focused on my hand, on the gold lines visible at my wrist where my sleeve rode up. When a Vorshala warrior bonds with a Talith blade, they spend months in preparation. They undergo conditioning. They train their neural pathways through meditation and combat drills designed to make their nervous systems receptive to the metal. The bonding ceremony itself takes days, and even with all that preparation, the blade accepts only a fraction of those who attempt it. You achieved a near-complete bond in 8 seconds, while standing in a trade station lobby with no training, no preparation, and no understanding of what was happening. I was not trying to bond with anything. I was trying to hand you your sword back. I know. And that is the part I cannot reconcile with everything I was taught to believe. She paused, and something shifted behind her eyes. Something vulnerable that I suspected she would never have shown me if anyone else had been in the room. My blade has been restless since the incident. It no longer pulses in sync with my heartbeat. The rhythm has shifted. It follows a different pattern now, a different frequency. I believe it is following yours. The room went quiet. I could hear the hum of the station's life support systems and the faint, persistent buzz of the translator working between us, converting meaning across a gulf of biology and culture and 4,000 years of accumulated fear. "When you held it," Sirith said, "what did you feel?" I considered giving her the diplomatic answer, the safe answer, the one that would make the upcoming trial of denial cleaner and simpler, and less fraught with catastrophic potential. But she had come to this meeting alone and unarmed, stripping away every layer of authority and protection, and she was asking with a directness that deserved equal directness in return. It felt like holding a live wire, I said. Every nerve in my body told me to release it. The pain was beyond anything I have ever experienced. But underneath the pain, there was something else. A vibration, a frequency, as if the blade was reaching into my nervous system and finding pathways that were already there, already formed, already waiting for exactly this signal. It did not feel like the sword was attacking me. It felt like it was introducing itself. Sordeth was silent for a long time. The translator hummed in the space between us. "That," she said finally, "is exactly what it feels like when the blade first bonds with us as children. The burning, the resistance. And then the moment of recognition, when the pain becomes a conversation. You felt the bonding call, Commander. No outsider has ever described it. No outsider was supposed to be capable of receiving it." We looked at each other across the table, a human diplomat and a Vorshala blade master, and for the first time, I understood the full scope of what had happened in that atrium. I had not just touched a sword, I had spoken its language, and the sword had answered in mine. "I will do the trial of denial," I said. "I will drop the blade." "I hope you can," said Sirith. And the way she said it, quiet and steady, and stripped of everything, except honesty, told me that she was not certain I could. Because if you cannot, everything changes. For both of us. For everyone. She stood and left without ceremony. I sat alone in the conference room and pressed my gold-veined palm flat against the table. The pulse in my arm was stronger than it had been that morning. Closer. More insistent. The blade was somewhere on this station, sealed in Sirith's quarters behind locked doors and encrypted security protocols, and I could feel it the way you feel bass at a concert. Not hearing it with your ears, experiencing it with your entire body. I told myself I would drop the sword. I repeated it in my head like a mantra, over and over, as I walked back to my quarters. I would drop the sword. But the gold threads in my arm pulsed with every step, and each pulse carried the same message, patient and warm and absolutely certain. Hold on. The trial of denial was held in the largest arena bay on Cathara Annex, a cavernous space normally used for bulk cargo inspections that had been cleared, reconfigured, and transformed into something that looked disturbingly like a gladiatorial ring. Observation galleries rose on all four sides, packed with representatives from 36 species. The Galactic Broadcast Network carried the feed in real time to every inhabited system within transmission range. Diplomatic correspondents from civilizations I had never heard of had requested press access. What had started as an awkward incident between a junior human attaché and a Vorshala blade master had become, in the span of 72 hours, the most watched event in recent galactic history. I stood in the center of a ritual circle, drawn on the arena floor, in luminescent paint that glowed with a soft white light. The circle was 20 meters across, bounded by symbols in ancient Vorshala script that my translator rendered only partially. Something about truth and fire and the weight of what is held. Not comforting words. Sirith stood at the edge of the circle opposite me. She was in full ceremonial armor, every plate polished to a mirror finish, her scales gleaming beneath the arena lights. Her 6 eyes burned with an intensity that I recognized not as aggression, but as control. She was holding herself together the way a dam holds back a river, through structural integrity and nothing else. Between us, on a stone pedestal that had been transported from the Vorshala ship for this specific ritual, lay her Taelith blade. The blade glowed blue, the same steady, rhythmic pulse I had seen in the atrium, the heartbeat of a sleeping weapon. But even from 10 meters away, I could feel it pulling at the gold threads in my arm, a gentle tug, a tide against an anchor chain, patient and persistent and absolutely certain of what it wanted. Sirith's 12 warriors formed a ring around me inside the circle. Each carried a ceremonial rod, a weapon forged specifically for this ritual. Blunted along its striking edge, but heavy, dense, designed not to cut, but to deliver impact. Not meant to kill, meant to convince, meant to give the body such compelling reasons to let go that the hand had no choice but to open. The arena fell silent. 3,000 aliens watched from the galleries above. Billions more watched through camera feeds and broadcast relays, and holographic projections on worlds I would never visit. I stood there in my dress uniform with my scarred hand at my side, and my heart hammering hard enough that I was certain every Vorshala in the room could hear it. Sirith raised her voice, and it carried across the arena with the resonance of ritual. The trial of denial begins. Let the blade speak and be answered. She nodded to me. I walked toward the pedestal. With each step, the pull grew stronger. The gold threads in my arm were vibrating now, a low hum that I felt in my teeth, my spine, the backs of my eyes, the hollow spaces behind my ribs. The blade's blue glow intensified as I approached, brightening at the edges, flickering with hints of gold that appeared and vanished like sparks. It knew I was coming. It remembered me. It had been waiting. I reached the pedestal. I looked down at the blade. It was beautiful. Not the way a weapon is beautiful. All clean lines and functional elegance. Beautiful the way a living thing is beautiful. The metal moved. I could see patterns shifting across its surface, fractals and whirls and spirals that changed and evolved like weather patterns viewed from orbit. It pulsed with light that matched my heartbeat perfectly, and looking at it, standing over it, I felt a recognition that bypassed every rational faculty I possessed. I had held this blade for 8 seconds in an atrium. My body remembered those 8 seconds the way it remembered how to breathe. I reached out with my scarred right hand. My fingers were trembling. My palm still bore the half-healed blisters from the atrium, the damaged skin threaded with gold, in patterns that echoed the fractals on the blade. I picked it up. The world changed. Gold light erupted from the metal, so bright that I saw the nearest warriors throw their arms across their faces. The light poured up my arm and flooded through the gold threads in my nervous system, and it did not burn. Not this time. This time it sang. That is the only word adequate to describe the sensation. A frequency that resonated through every cell in my body, every nerve, every synapse, every quantum of electrical potential in my brain. The blade's voice poured through the established pathways the gold particles had built in my arm, and it filled me, the way water fills a vessel, completely and without resistance. My fingers closed around the hilt, not from pain, not from muscle spasm, from recognition. My hand shaped itself to the grip, as if the metal had reshaped itself in the instant of contact, to fit the exact contour of my palm, my fingers, the specific architecture of my human hand. It fit the way a key fits a lock, the way a word fits a sentence, the way something you have been reaching for your entire life fits when you finally close your hand around it. The 10 heartbeats began. I counted them. I had told Sirith I would drop the blade. I had told the ambassador. I had told myself. I counted each beat like a prayer. 1, 2, 3. The blade sang louder with each pulse, the gold light intensifying, the resonance deepening until I could feel it in my bones, in my marrow, in the spaces between my thoughts where instinct lives. 4, 5, 6. Drop it, let go, open your hand. My brain screamed the command at my fingers with everything it had. My fingers did not move. The blade was communicating with my nervous system through the integrated gold particles, and the message it was sending bypassed voluntary motor control entirely. My conscious mind said, release. My nervous system said, hold. 7, 8, 9. I focused every ounce of willpower I possessed on a single action. Open your hand. 5 fingers. Simple mechanics. The most basic motor function a human body can perform. Curl the fingers back, release the grip, let the metal fall. My hand shook, my arm shook. The gold threads in my forearm blazed through my skin like filaments of molten light. 10. My hand did not open. The beating began. The first blow caught me across the shoulders. A ceremonial rod wielded by a Vorshala warrior with 4,000 years of martial heritage behind the swing. The impact drove me forward a step and detonated across my upper back like a thunderclap, translated into pain. My teeth slammed together. My vision stuttered. My knees flexed but held. The second blow hit my ribs on the left side. I heard something give, a sound more felt than heard, the sharp percussion of bone accepting more force than it was designed to bear. A fracture, maybe two. A line of fire wrapped around my side and made every breath an exercise in controlled suffering. The third blow caught my left arm. The fourth hit my right thigh and buckled my knee, and I went down, dropping to one knee on the arena floor. The stone was hard and cold against my kneecap, and the world was narrowing around me, contracting into a tunnel of pain and golden light, and the song of the blade resonating through every nerve I possessed. My comm buzzed. Ambassador Hargrove's voice, tiny and frantic in my ear. "Drop it, Calloway. That is a direct order. Drop the sword right now." I could not answer her. A rod struck my back between the shoulder blades, and I pitched forward, catching myself with my free hand. I was on all fours now, the blade blazing in my right grip, blood from my split lip pattering on the arena floor, in small red drops that turned gold where the light touched them. "Drop the blade. Just open your hand. 5 fingers. Simple." But the blade was singing my name. Not Commander. Not Calloway. Ethan. Over and over in a voice that had no sound but filled every corner of my consciousness. It was not forcing my hand closed. It was not overriding my motor control. It was simply there, present, connected, woven into my nervous system so completely that releasing it would be like trying to voluntarily stop my own heartbeat. The bond had crossed the threshold from external to internal. The blade was not something I was holding, it was something I was. Another blow. Another. The warriors struck in disciplined rotation, each impact measured and precise, and each wave of pain drove deeper into my body, and each wave was answered by a pulse of gold light that coursed through the threads in my arm and pushed the pain back just far enough to keep me conscious, just far enough to keep me present, Alashtards just far enough to keep me holding on. Then the warriors faltered. The first to stop was the youngest. I saw him through the haze of pain and golden light, standing at the edge of the circle with his rod raised for a swing that never fell. He was staring at my arm, at the gold threads that had spread past my elbow, past my shoulder, climbing the side of my neck in a lattice of metallic light clearly visible through my skin. His mouth was open, his rod trembled in his grip, then he lowered it slowly and stepped backward out of the circle. The warrior beside him stopped. His rod dropped to his side, then the next one. I heard ceremonial weapons hitting the floor, one after another, a cascade of falling metal that echoed through the breathless arena. Through the fog of pain, I raised my head and saw Cyrith's elite guard coming apart for the second time in a week. But this was not the atrium. This was not confusion or surprise. This was 12 warriors watching something their oldest texts described as the end of an era, something that was supposed to be impossible, something they had trained their entire lives to prevent. A full Kalthar bonding, happening in real time, in front of them, on a live galactic broadcast. One warrior turned and ran. He did not walk. He did not retreat with measured discipline. He dropped his rod and sprinted for the arena exit with the raw, uncontrolled desperation of someone fleeing a force beyond comprehension. A second followed, armor clanking, then 3 more. The sound of their retreat was the sound of certainty shattering. Cirith stepped into the circle. She crossed the distance between us in 3 long strides, moving with the fluid speed that made the Vorshala such devastating fighters. She seized my wrist with both hands and tried to pry my fingers open. Her strength was enormous. The Vorshala were 3 times stronger than any human. She wrenched at my grip with everything she had, and I felt my tendons strain and my bones grind. And for one agonizing instant, I thought she might physically break my fingers apart. The blade flared. A pulse of gold light erupted from the metal with concussive force. Cyrith was hurled backward off her feet. She flew 3 meters through the air and hit the arena floor on her back and skidded another 2 before friction stopped her. The sound of her armor scraping against stone cut through the silent arena like a blade through cloth. Her own weapon had just rejected her. The sword she had carried since childhood, the blade bonded to her nervous system through decades of shared heartbeat and shared purpose, had thrown its master across a room to protect its new bond, its new choice. The remaining warriors did not stay. The ones still standing, still holding their rods, still clinging to some last fragment of training and duty, broke. They dropped everything: rods, sidearms, ceremonial armor pieces. One warrior unclipped her own bonded Taelith blade from her hip and left it on the arena floor, abandoned, because the sight of what was happening in that circle had overwhelmed every instinct except the instinct to run. 12 warriors, the most elite fighters in the Vorshala military. They fled the arena in full view of 36 species and a galactic broadcast audience numbering in the billions, and the sound of their armored feet echoing off the arena walls was the sound of a civilization confronting its oldest and deepest fear. I knelt alone in the center of the ritual circle. The blade blazed gold in my hand. The light had stabilized into a steady, warm glow that painted the arena walls and ceiling in amber and shadow. I could feel it in my entire body now. A second pulse beneath my own. A second heartbeat, steady and strong, beating in perfect synchronization with mine. When I breathed, the light pulsed with my lungs. When I blinked, the glow flickered. The blade was bonded, fully, permanently, and irreversibly woven into my nervous system. It was part of me now, as natural and as inescapable as my own pulse. Cyrith pushed herself up from the arena floor. She was not injured, but she moved slowly, carefully, with the deliberate caution of someone who has just discovered that the ground beneath them is not as solid as they believed. She stood and looked at me from across the empty circle, and the expression on her face was something I had never seen on a Vorshala before. It was grief. Deep, quiet, devastating grief. The kind that comes from losing something you have carried with you so long that you forgot it was separate from yourself. "It is done," she said. Her voice was low, but the arena was so silent that it carried to every gallery, every camera, every ear that was listening. The blade has chosen. I knelt there, bruised and bleeding, holding a weapon I had never asked for, and a title I had never imagined, and the galactic feed carried my image to screens across 1,000 worlds, and I felt the blade hum in my hand, warm and patient and eternal. And I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. They took me to the medical bay under armed escort, though the word escort carried a different meaning than it had 3 days earlier. The station security officers assigned to walk me from the arena to the med bay maintained a distance of 5 paces on every side, creating a buffer of empty space around me that made the corridors feel enormous. They had their weapons holstered. Their hands were visible. They moved with the careful, deliberate body language of people who wanted to make absolutely clear that they posed no threat. I was the one with the glowing sword now. I was the one they were being careful around. Dr. Ashworth met me at the medbay entrance and stopped short when he saw the blade still in my hand. "You are still holding it," he said. "I am aware. Can you put it down?" I tried. I focused my full attention on my right hand, visualized the fingers opening, sent the command through every voluntary neural pathway I could consciously access. Nothing happened. My hand remained closed around the hilt as if the two had been fused together. The blade sat in my grip with the comfortable weight of something that belonged there. "Not yet," I said. Dr. Ashworth guided me to a treatment table and began working on my injuries while I sat there holding a glowing alien weapon, which was not the most dignified medical experience I had ever had. 3 fractured ribs, a split lip, deep bruising across my shoulders, upper back, and both legs. A hairline crack in my right kneecap from the impact with the arena floor. Nothing that would not heal with time, but the aggregate pain was significant enough that Dr. Ashworth administered a targeted analgesic before he turned his attention to the gold threads. When he examined them, his face went through a journey of expressions that ended somewhere in the neighborhood of professional awe. "The circuit is complete," he said, tracing the gold lines on a holographic scan of my body. "The metallic threads now extend from your palm through your peripheral nervous system, up your arm, through your shoulder, along the brachial plexus, and into your spinal column. They are interfacing directly with your central nervous system." "I can feel it," I said. "The blade. I can feel it, the way I feel my own hand. It is not separate from me. It is part of my sensory experience. Because neurologically, it is. Your brain is treating the blade as an extension of your own body. The neural integration is complete. That is why you cannot set it down. For the same reason you cannot voluntarily detach your own finger. Your nervous system does not recognize a boundary between your hand and the hilt. He worked on my injuries in silence for a while, applying bone-knitting gel to my fractured ribs, sealing the split in my lip, wrapping my bruised knee. Then he spoke again, quietly. You understand this changes things, not just for you. I know. For all of us. Every human, everywhere. Before I could respond, the door opened, and Ambassador Hargrove walked in. She looked like she had not slept in 3 days, which was probably accurate. Behind her came Pelix, whose wings were pressed so tightly against his back that they had gone nearly transparent, the Gantheran equivalent of white-knuckled hands. Behind Pelix came a communications officer carrying a portable terminal that was flashing with what appeared to be several hundred incoming messages from across the galaxy. The Vorshala High Command has issued a formal declaration, said Hargrove. Her voice was measured and precise, the tone of someone managing a crisis by refusing to acknowledge the size of it. They have officially recognized a Kael'thar ascension, the first in 4,000 years. What does that mean in practical terms? It means the blade is legally, spiritually, and culturally yours under Vorshala law. The bond is recognized, the transfer of allegiance is recorded. It also means you now hold a title that I had to have explained to me 3 times before I believed it was real. She paused. TheiHFY, Blade Sovereign. That title places you above every blade-bearing warrior in the Vorshala military hierarchy. Every single one. Because the strength of the bond determines rank, and your bond is apparently the strongest in 4 millennia. I stared at her. You outrank the entire Vorshala officer corps, she said. A human diplomatic attaché who had never held a sword before last week now technically commands the most feared military force in the known galaxy. That cannot be how their system works. Their law is very clear on this point, Calloway. The blade chooses. The choice is absolute. There is no appeals process. There is no review board. There is no mechanism for overturning the decision of a TheiHFY blade. Because in 4,000 years of cultural development since the last Kael'thar event, they never imagined they would need one. Pelix stepped forward, his wings flickering with residual distress. The galactic reaction is already cascading through every diplomatic and commercial channel in this sector. The Drenari Confederacy has submitted 6 separate alliance proposals to your embassy, each more generous than the last. The Telluran Commerce Guild has reclassified humanity's threat index from Tier 7 to Tier 2, which grants your species preferential trading status across 14 star systems. The Gantheran Assembly has formally requested a bilateral summit at the highest diplomatic level. He paused, and something in his expression shifted. Species that have been blocking humanity's admission to the Galactic Compact for the past decade have withdrawn their objections. All of them, in the last 3 hours. Because of a sword? Because of what the sword represents, Commander. For centuries, the galactic community has evaluated species based on 3 metrics: military capability, technological advancement, economic power. Humanity ranked low on all 3 scales. You were tolerated, not respected. But the TheiHFY blade does not measure any of those things. It measures something else entirely, something that cannot be built or bought or stolen. Pelix looked at me with an expression I had never seen on a Gantheran face before. Respect. Genuine, undisguised respect. It measures will, and apparently, your species possesses it in quantities that the galaxy was not prepared for. The communications terminal continued to flash behind Hargrove. Messages from governments, military commands, trade guilds, academic institutions, cultural organizations, and entities whose functions I could not even identify. Requests for alliance, offers of partnership, expressions of interest from civilizations that had never acknowledged humanity's existence before this week. The entire galactic order was reshuffling itself around a single event in a cargo arena on a neutral trade station. And at the center of that reshuffling was a man with a bruised face and 3 fractured ribs, holding a sword he had picked up because leaving it on the floor seemed rude. Sirith came to the medical bay an hour later. She came alone. No guards, no armor, no weapon. She walked through the door in what I recognized as standard Vorshala civilian clothing, simple and unadorned, and she looked diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. She was still 4 feet taller than me. She still radiated the physical presence of an apex predator, the kind of being whose evolutionary heritage was written in every line of her body, but something was missing. Something essential had been subtracted from her, and its absence changed the shape of everything that remained. Her blade, her companion, the weapon that had been part of her for 31 years, the heartbeat that had matched hers, the presence that had lived in her nervous system the way a voice lives in a singer's throat. It was gone, and its absence was carved into her face. "I can feel where it used to be," she said. She stood at the foot of my treatment table and looked at the blade in my hand, and her voice was steady but hollow, like a bell that is cracked. Not pain, silence, like pressing my hand against a wall where a door used to be. The space it occupied is still there, but the connection is severed. The pulse is gone. "I am sorry," I said, and I meant it with everything I had. Whatever the blade's choice meant for the galaxy, or for humanity, or for the grand sweep of interstellar politics, this woman, standing in front of me, had lost something irreplaceable, and I was the one holding it. "Do not apologize," she said. There was no anger in the words, no bitterness, just a vast, quiet acceptance that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than emotion. "The blade chose as the blade chose. I will not dishonor its decision with resentment." She paused, and something shifted behind her eyes, something fragile and honest that I suspected she had never shown anyone before. "But I will tell you something I could never say in front of my warriors, something I could barely say to myself." She sat down in the chair beside my bed. For a long moment she was silent, looking at the blade in my hand, watching its gold light pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. "The blade was right," she said. "What do you mean?" "I have carried that weapon for 31 years. In the early years, the bond was strong, fierce. The blade and I moved as one thought, fought as one purpose, breathed as one rhythm. There was no gap between my intention and the weapon's response. We were seamless. But in recent years, something had changed. The pulse grew uneven, the resonance weakened. Small hesitations appeared in the connection, moments where the blade seemed to lag behind my intent, as if it was questioning my direction before following it. I told myself it was fatigue, age, the natural settling of a long bond, but the truth was simpler and harder than any of those explanations. She looked at me directly. I had lost my fire, Commander, my conviction, the certainty that drives a warrior forward through uncertainty and pain and doubt. I was going through the motions of command without the spark that gives those motions meaning. The blade sensed it. Over years, it felt my intention diminish, my will soften, my purpose blur at the edges, and it began to search for something brighter. And it found a diplomatic attaché who picked it up because he thought leaving it on the floor would be impolite. A sound came from her that might have been a laugh in a different context, a short exhalation through her teeth that carried something warmer than grief. Yes, it found someone who held power without wanting it. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? The Vorshala spend their entire lives trying to prove they deserve their blades. They approach the bond as a conquest, as masters demanding obedience from a servant. They pour ambition and aggression and hunger into the connection, believing that the blade responds to strength of force. But the blade does not measure force, it measures will. And the purest will is the one that holds without grasping, that grips without possessing, that refuses to let go, not because it wants what it is holding, but because letting go would be wrong. I looked at the sword in my hand. Its gold light had settled into a warm, steady glow, comfortable and constant, like lamplight in a room where you feel safe. The song in my nervous system had quieted to a hum, a background frequency that felt as natural as the sound of my own blood moving through my veins. "I do not want to be a warlord," I said. "I know. I do not want to command your military, or claim your territories, or fulfill your prophecy of conquest. I am a diplomat. I solve problems by talking about them until everyone is too tired to fight. The most dangerous thing I have ever done before this was eat street food in a district that the travel advisory described as adventurous. I know that too. Then help me find another way, a way that does not end in war or subjugation, or 4,000 years of history repeating itself. Because I did not pick up that sword to take it from you. I picked it up to give it back. And that has to mean something. Sireth sat in the chair beside my bed and looked at the blade and thought. I could see the process happening behind her eyes, the dismantling of a lifetime of certainty, the careful examination of each assumption and belief, and inherited truth that had shaped her understanding of what the Kael'thar meant. The prophecy said the blade thief would come as a conqueror, a destroyer, a being who would wield the stolen weapon as a tool of domination. That was the story. That was the nightmare. But prophecies are stories, and stories, I had learned in my years as a diplomat, can always be told differently. There is no precedent for what you are suggesting, she said. Then we create one. The traditionalists in the high command will resist. They will see your refusal to use the blade as weakness, as evidence that you are unworthy of the bond. Good, I am a diplomat. Resistance is just a conversation that has not happened yet. She looked at me, and I saw something in her 6 eyes that I had not seen before. Not fear, not grief. Not the careful distance of a warrior assessing an adversary, something warmer, the faintest spark of something that might, with time and patience, and a willingness to rewrite old stories, grow into hope. I proposed something that had no precedent in Vorshala history. I would not keep the blade as a weapon of conquest. I would not return it, because the bond was permanent, and returning it was biologically impossible. Instead, I would carry it as a shared symbol, a TheiHFY who served not as a warlord, but as a bridge between civilizations, a blade sovereign who fought with words first and steel never, a living proof that strength without ambition was not a contradiction, but a possibility. 3 days later, in a ceremony broadcast to every inhabited system in the galactic network, Sireth Valkoran formally acknowledged me as TheiHFY. The ceremony took place in the same arena where the trial of denial had fractured 4,000 years of tradition. But this time, the space was filled with something other than warriors and weapons. Delegates, diplomats, traders and scholars and journalists and cultural attachés from 36 species, packed into the observation galleries and spilling onto the arena floor, watching a moment that every analyst and commentator agreed would reshape the political architecture of the known galaxy. Sireth spoke first. She stood at the edge of the ritual circle, where 3 days earlier her warriors had fled, and her blade had thrown her across the floor, and she spoke in the formal Vorshala ritual cadence, a mode of speech reserved for moments of civilizational significance. The blade has chosen, she said. As it chose before, 3 times in our history, it has reached beyond the Vorshala and found a hand it preferred to our own. But the Kael'thar who stands before us is not what our prophecies foretold. He is not a conqueror. He is not a destroyer. He is not the monster that our children's stories warned us about. He is a man who picked up a burning sword because someone dropped it, and his first instinct was to give it back. She paused, and her voice strengthened. The blade did not find a warrior. It found something our warriors have never been. It found a hand that holds without grasping. She turned to me. In her 6 eyes, I saw something I would carry with me for the rest of my life, however long or short the galaxy decided that would be. Acceptance. Not resignation, not defeat. True acceptance. The kind that comes when you stop fighting what the world is and begin working with what it could be. I spoke next. I spoke in Vorshala, halting and imperfect, coached by Sireth over 3 sleepless nights in the conference room where we had first sat across from each other as adversaries and gradually become something closer to allies. The words were drawn from the same ritual texts that had governed the Kael'thar prophecy for millennia, but I had changed them. With Sireth's guidance and her quiet courage, I had rewritten the ending. I accept the blade's choice, I said, and my accent was terrible, but the words were clear. I honor the bond that was forged in fire and sealed in blood. I stand before you as TheiHFY, and I tell you what the blade already knows. I am not your enemy. I am not your conqueror. I am not the end of your story. I am the bridge between the world you knew and the world that is being born. And I will hold this blade the way I held it on the first day, Not raised in threat, not sheathed in hiding. Present, patient, ready. The arena was silent for 3 heartbeats. Then Cyrith saluted me. A full Vorshala combat salute, fist pressed to the center of her chest, head bowed in recognition of a superior bond. Behind her, one by one, the Vorshala delegates in the gallery followed, fists to chests, heads bowed. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Enough to crack the foundation of 4,000 years of fear and let something new begin to push through. The Drenari delegation began to applaud. Their clapping was an odd sound, multiple limbs striking together in patterns that created a complex rhythm. The Tellurans joined in, their applause a softer thing, palms brushing against palms. Then the Gantherans, then species I could not name and had never met, species who a week ago would not have given a human the time of day. The sound built and layered and filled the arena and washed over me like a wave breaking on a shore. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Ambassadors and delegates formed a line that stretched the length of the reception hall, each one waiting to speak with me. Alliance proposals, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, military cooperation frameworks, scientific research partnerships. The entire architecture of galactic diplomacy that humanity had been locked out of for decades was suddenly, startlingly open, and the key had been a sword I never wanted and a title I never sought. Ambassador Hargrove found me in a quiet corner of the hall, leaning against a viewport with the blade at my hip and a drink I had barely touched in my free hand. "New assignment," she said. Her voice had lost the sharp edge of crisis management and settled into something warmer. "Effective immediately. Senior Diplomatic Envoy to the Vorshala Confederacy. Direct appointment from Earth." I laughed. I could not help it. 3 months ago I was furniture. A junior attaché filing daily reports that nobody read, stationed on a trade outpost that the diplomatic corps used as a dumping ground for unremarkable officers with unremarkable careers. Now I was the most recognized human in the galaxy, carrying a weapon that pulsed gold against my hip. "One condition," I said. "You are hardly in a position to negotiate conditions, Calloway. Cyrith serves as my advisor, not under my command, not as a subordinate. Beside me, as a partner. I cannot be a bridge to the Vorshala if I do not have a Vorshala who trusts me standing at my side." Hargrove studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "I will make it happen." She walked away to work the room. I finished my drink and set the glass down on a ledge and stood there for a moment, alone in the corner with the viewport behind me, framing a field of stars and the distant running lights of ships coming and going from Cathara Annex. I flexed my right hand. The gold lattice in my arm had stabilized completely. Dr. Ashworth said it would remain permanently, a network of metallic threads woven through my nervous system that marked me as blade-bonded, a scar that glowed, a gift that hummed. A permanent reminder that I had held something burning and refused to let go, not because I was brave or strong or worthy, but because my mother raised me to return things that did not belong to me, and my body would not let my manners fail. I clipped the blade to my belt and walked out of the reception hall. The main corridor of Cathara Annex was busy, as it always was. Dozens of species moving in currents and eddies of commerce and conversation and daily life. But as I walked, something was different. A Gantheran merchant who had never once looked in my direction met my eyes and nodded. A Telluran trader stepped aside to give me room, not out of fear but out of something that looked like respect. A Drenari weapons dealer, the same one who had offered me a free pistol in the first days after the atrium incident, raised a hand in greeting and smiled. Nobody looked through me. For the first time since I had arrived on this station, not a single alien in that crowded corridor looked through me as if I were not there. They saw me. They acknowledged me, some with curiosity, some with wariness, some with a warmth that I had not expected and did not take for granted. But they saw me. They saw all of us. Every human, everywhere, for the first time in our short galactic history. I walked through the corridor with the blade humming at my hip, warm and steady, beating in perfect time with my heart. 2 rhythms locked together, 2 lives intertwined, a weapon and a diplomat, bonded by accident and held together by will. I thought about what Cyrith had said, that the blade does not measure strength, or skill, or ferocity, that it measures will, the quality of what you hold, and why you hold it. The Vorshala had always believed the Kael'thar would come as a destroyer, because destruction was the only form of strength they understood. They never considered the possibility that the blade might find something it valued more than power. That the strongest grip in the galaxy might belong to someone who simply refused to let go of something because dropping it felt wrong. My name is Ethan Calloway. I am a diplomat, a bridge between worlds, and a blade sovereign who has never swung his sword. The blade chose me because I held it without wanting it, and I will hold it still.